So this is the second part of the theory video about layout and camera. And at the end of the first part, we were talking about visual continuity, or the 180-degree rule, which is also called crossing the line. And this is a concept in filmmaking that is very important to grasp. If you have these two characters here, here's blue and orange, and they're talking to each other. Let's say it's just a standard soap opera setup. And you've got your camera over here, looking at blue and orange. And that's the view you're going to get. You're going to see blue on the left, orange on the right. If you move the camera across this imaginary line between the two of them, you move the camera over here, you're suddenly going to get blue on the right and orange on the left. And that is what we mean by crossing the line. In other words, whenever we're filming blue and orange talking, we want to keep the camera on this side of the imaginary line between them, so that blue is always on the left and orange is always on the right. And that's why it's called the 180-degree rule, because you don't want to cross this 180-degree imaginary line. If you do cross it, if you do have blue popping from screen right to screen left and orange popping from screen right to screen left, it tends to confuse the audience. So for example, here's an example taken from Toy Story. You've got Woody and Buzz. This is a sort of top view. There's our camera over there. It's pointing at the back of Buzz, and we see Woody in view. So Buzz is going to be on the left, Woody is going to be on the right. And we can move the camera over here. So Buzz is still on the left, and Woody is still on the right. And where it goes wrong is if we move the camera to this side of the line here. So now the camera, we've got Woody on the left and Buzz on the right. Suddenly the audience is confused. And you'll see this done all the time. Here are two British TV performers called Ant and Dec. And I don't watch Ant and Dec particularly, but you'll find with Ant and Dec when they're on the TV that Ant is always on the left and Dec is always on the right. It's never Dec and Ant. It's always Ant and Dec, and they maintain their own visual continuity. And you'll see this used in filmmaking all the time. Go ahead and Google, I think it's on YouTube, this famous sequence with Gollum and Sméagol from The Lord of the Rings. And you'll see Sméagol is on the left and the Gollum character is on the right. Obviously, it's just one character talking. But what Peter Jackson does is he swings the camera around from left to right so that when it's Sméagol talking, you see him on the left. And when it's Gollum talking, you see him on the right. And that maintains the audience's visual continuity of what's going on. If you watch old war movies, you'll see this. The Allies are usually on the left-hand side of the screen, and the Axis powers are usually shown on the right. So, for example, if the Germans are attacking, you're going to have German warplanes on the right-hand side. If the British are defending, you usually have British planes on the left-hand side. And this maintains a kind of geographical continuity. German stormtroopers on the right, British Tommies on the left. And you'll see it used all the time. And by the way, if you're directing films, it becomes very important because you want to have a kind of overall map of what's going on in your head. Where are the characters? Where's the kid's house? Where's the town square? Where are all of these things? And you want to make sure that the camera respects that and you keep certain geographic elements in one place. Another important rule is that the camera should follow and never lead. So if you're going to have a character walk out of a room, you don't want to have the camera start moving and then the character start moving. You always have the character start to walk out of the room and then the camera follows. And that's because the camera should really be invisible. If the camera leads, then the audience will notice the camera. And that's what you don't want. The audience should never notice the camera. The good camera work is really invisible. Focal length. Let's talk a little bit about depth of field. I'll just go through this quickly. There's a separate lecture at the end of the course on depth of field. It's not something we need to go into in great detail at all, but it is important to know that what depth of field simply means is if your camera is here and it's pointing at this butterfly, if the depth of field is narrow, that means only the butterfly in this area is going to be in focus. Any butterfly here will be blurred, any butterfly here will be blurred. Conversely, if you have a wide depth of field, then all the butterflies will be in focus. That's the key difference between the two. Typically, a camera lens is set to, or a 35mm lens has a depth of field scale on it, if you're thinking in camera terms. So here's very shallow depth of field. Remember, this is just the butterfly in view here. Just our flower is in view. Everything in the distance is blurry. And this is wider depth of field. Here, all the butterflies are in view. The flowers in the foreground are in view, and the flowers in the background are in view. And it creates a very different feeling to it. This is if you tend to flatten things out, then you want a relatively shallow depth of a relatively wide depth of field. Maybe for action shots, you might want a narrow depth of field, a shallow depth of field, because the background will blur out and you'll get more dynamism to the shot. Here's another view of a kid being viewed. This is using a very shallow depth of field. The background is all blurred out. And here with this cat, again, it gives you more a sense of dynamism. You feel this paw coming towards us because we're using a shallow depth of field. This is taken from Citizen Kane, and this is what Kane called deep focus. Very, very wide depth of field. Everything here is in focus, even this lady's shoulder and her hair and the kid in the background. Everyone is in focus. Very, very specific style of filmmaking. Again, here's narrow depth of field. Just the letters in the middle are in focus. Here's another example of filmmaking. Here's a rack focus. This is what you do when you change the focus in a shot with a narrow depth of field from the background or the foreground or the other way around. So here was a shot taken from The Lion King where you've got these leafcutter ants walking across a twig, and then we have a rack focus, and suddenly the background is in focus and the leafcutter ants are out of focus. This was considered very, very pioneering when this was done. This kind of thing was standard in live-action filmmaking, but in animation this was considered to be very, very unusual. So applying live-action film techniques to animation. Here's another famous shot. This is called a reverse tracking shot. It's also known as a dolly zoom, a contra zoom, a reverse pull, and a trombone shot. And this is a famous shot from Goodfellas, pioneered by Martin Scorsese, in which these two characters are talking to each other, and the Robert De Niro character is actually about to kill the Ray Liotta character. And the Ray Liotta character figures out that he is going to be killed by Robert De Niro. And what happens is, even though these two men remain stationary in the shot, the background slowly comes towards us. And you have the feeling of literally of Ray Liotta's world closing in on him. And this is a very, very brilliant shot. And you'll see it done all the time in movies now. And basically the way it's done is the camera is actually moving towards the characters, but but zooming away from them. So the dolly and the zoom are opposing each other. In other words, you're dollying towards the characters but zooming away from them, or you're dollying away from them and zooming towards them. I can't remember. But the effect is to leave these two characters static and to dramatically change the background. So that's a famous shot often used in filmmaking now. A camera wipe. What is a wipe? It's simply a kind of transition. You'll see George Lucas use them all the time in the Star Wars series. Here he's wiping from spaceships to two people walking in the desert. Very, very common. He uses all kinds of wipes, side wipes, top wipes, circular looping wipes, all kinds of wipes. What about a cross dissolve? That's when you're fading out from one image to another. In this case, we've got a bowl of apples and also a bowl of oranges. And this is the middle of the fade. So you're fading from one image to another. Sometimes people call it mixes. What's the magic circle rule? The magic circle rule is a rule which actually I saw coined by Brad Bird on The Iron Giant. And it was used to describe really what he meant by putting the action in the center of the screen. So if this rectangle is the screen, you're putting the action in the middle bit where the audience will see it. And the reason he used to talk about this was because a lot of the newbie animators would have stuff going on in the corners of the screen. You know, really well worked out animation, but not well staged. And so Brad would say, no, you've got to put it in the middle. Put it in the middle where people will see it, the magic circle. Sometimes directors will break the magic circle rule. This is Alien by Ridley Scott. You can't see it very well, but this character here is looking at a cat who's in the bottom left hand of the screen. And he's got all this blank space here. So why has Ridley Scott got all this blank space here? And the answer is because a tentacle is about to come in the screen. and this guy is about to die. So he's using it very deliberately to create a sense of expectation. What's going on here? What's about to happen here? Another important rule in cinematography is composition, the rule of thirds, as it's called. And the rule of thirds it's also known as the golden mean, and sometimes called the golden rule. And so if you imagine your image divided into 9 equal parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, each divided by 2 horizontal and vertical lines. And the idea is that the important compositional elements should be placed at the intersection of these lines. So this tree here is down here in this golden mean. And if you consider these 2 ways of staging a shot, you stage this landscape with this big rock right in the middle or slightly off to the side, you'll see that this is more visually satisfying. So this view here on the right is observing the golden mean, and this view here on the left is not. Now, if you want to practice this stuff, there isn't a specific camera exercise for us this week, or indeed any week. But if you want to practice with your camera work, you could try doing, have several shots, 3 shots of Monty walking. And you could have Monty walking, he's walking along, and then he sees something and stops. So what you'd have to do is take the Monty walk cycle and copy it out a few times, copy and paste the curves. You'd have to import a set, maybe a city street, something like that, lots of free sets at Turbo Squid. And it doesn't have to be Monty, it can be any character that you like. Then now working in one single shot, you obviously create a shot camera and then just animate the camera on stepped curves so it moves around within the screen. So say your first shot might be a wide shot. You have a wide shot of Monty walking along. And then maybe Monty stops and you cut to a mid shot of Monty walking along, or maybe stopping. And then maybe the final shot you might cut to a view of the street where maybe Monty sees something. And then you might cut back to Monty, that would be 4 shots, and see Monty's reaction to the person coming down the street. So this is a simple exercise to get the hang of telling the story with the camera, which is what this is really about. Good camera work is really about storytelling without words. It's visual storytelling. And remember Eisenstein's theory of montage, a series of uninflected images which tell the story.